Good morning, it's Thursday the 18th of January here in London. This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, Pakistan launches strikes against Iran in a tit-for-tat escalation that risks a wider conflict.
Apple gets a triple whammy of bad news in just 24 hours. We have the details.
Plus, Sunak survives. The Prime Minister wins his key immigration vote, but challenges remain.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Pakistan has carried out targeted strikes against what it describes as terrorist hideouts in Iran. The move came after Iran allegedly launched strikes against a separatist group based in Pakistani province bordering the country. Bloomberg's Middle East economics and government editor Paul Wallace says the spiralling escalation is very unusual.
The two have a complicated but normally quite cordial relationship. This is pretty much unprecedented what we're seeing now with both of them striking each other's territory. Of course, they're not going for the other government, as it were. They are going for what they call our terrorists in each other's territory. But I think what we're seeing is this is just the latest arena opening up in the wider Middle Eastern conflict that began in early October when Hamas attacked Israel.
Paul Wallace also noting that Pakistan has downgraded its diplomatic ties by recalling its envoy from Tehran and asking the Iranian ambassador not to return to Islamabad.
The tit-for-tat military action between Pakistan and Iran comes as tensions continue to flare across the Middle East. Overnight, the US launched another round of strikes at 14 Houthi targets in Yemen as the militant group's attacks on shipping in the Red Sea continue. The US move came hours after an American-owned commercial vessel was attacked by a drone in the region. That was the third ship targeted by militants since a major round of US and UK-led strikes on Yemen. Speaking to Bloomberg, the UK's Foreign Secretary David Cameron says that Tehran bears ultimate responsibility for the Houthi attacks.
They're doing it because they're backed by Iran and they've had weapons provided to Iran. And, between the 19th of November and last weekend, they'd made 26 attacks. We'd given warning after warning, but we hadn't taken action. We have now taken action. We've demonstrated we're prepared to back our words and warnings with actions. And I believe that will make a difference.
Cameron spoke after meeting Iran's foreign minister at the World Economic Forum in Davos and warned him that the Houthi attacks are illegal and unacceptable.
Apple will sell its smartwatches without a blood oxygen feature in the United States after it lost one leg of a legal dispute involving the health technology firm Masimo. A US court rejected Apple's request for a longer pause on an import ban on the devices. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow says a long appeals process will likely follow the decision.
What the US Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit is saying is they are rejecting Apple's request for a longer pause on what was the International Trade Commission ban that was put in place. The mechanics of that are that they will have to stop selling the Series 9 and Ultra 2, but a much longer appeals process will play out, and Apple has said that appeals process can last for about a year.
Bloomberg's tech reporter Ed Ludlow there. The ruling is a further blow for Apple after Netflix opted not to launch an app for its new Vision Pro headset this week, and a major snub for the company. Separately, the US Justice Department is preparing to file an antitrust lawsuit against Apple for software limitations on its products that allegedly impede rivals.
Google CEO Sundar Pichai has told employees to expect more job cuts this year, according to an internal memo reported by The Verge. Bloomberg reported workers at the search giant have been on edge since January of last year, when Alphabet said that it would cut about 12,000 jobs, more than 6% of its global workforce. Pichai said in the recent memo that the cuts are not at the scale of last year's reductions and will not touch every team.
Here in the UK, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has passed his flagship Rwanda bill in Parliament, but at a significant political cost. Although only 11 Conservative MPs ultimately voted against the government, the debate saw many of the party's leading lights openly condemn Sunak's flagship plan. Even after the vote, former Cabinet Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg says it won't work.
I think the real problem for this bill is that we've got 8 or 9 months until election, and that this bill will probably take longer than that, with all the legal ramifications that you could get before people are on planes going. So my concern, the reason I backed amendments, was really to speed it up.
That's Jacob Rees-Mogg speaking there. The fractious mood in the party won't be helped by a YouGov poll for the Times newspaper showing support for the Conservatives have fallen to 20%, a level last seen during the disastrous premiership of Liz Truss.
After voting on that key Rwanda bill, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has travelled to Davos with plans to meet tech executives as part of a push for more UK investment. Bloomberg has learned that OpenAI's Sam Altman, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy and Alphabet CFO Ruth Porat are all part of Hunt's charm offensive. Britain used to be a key attendee at the gathering of the elite, but Hunt is the first UK finance minister to attend since the pandemic.
And 2024 has seen a boost to momentum in the UK's housing market. Growing demand and easing costs are behind the change. Bloomberg's Chris Pitt has the details.
Estate agents across the country are the most optimistic they've been since before the pandemic. According to a survey by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, yearly sale expectations hit their highest level since February 2020 at the end of last year. Increased positivity in the sector comes as cheaper mortgages are tempting buyers back off the sidelines. The RICS figures are another sign of improving fortunes after a report from property portal Rightmove showed asking prices jumped by the most in 8 months in January. In London, Chris Pitt, Bloomberg Radio.
And finally, Britain's biggest banks are bracing for a new mis-selling saga, this time with car loans. The Financial Conduct Authority has reached out to around a dozen banks, people familiar have said, and RBC estimates that potential compensation costs may reach £10 billion. Now, in a moment, we're going to hear more about the latest attacks in the Red Sea as we see tit-for-tat escalations between Pakistan and Iran. A pretty worrying development. We'll bring you the latest on those.
But first, I wanted to just point to a fascinating read from our colleague from Bloomberg Opinion, Javier Blas, who's writing about a growing business around power trading in Europe and how a select group of firms based in Denmark are monitoring weather forecasts very closely and making big bets on how much electricity prices will spike. So Javier Blas writes that this industry was only worth around $100 million per year for the big firms involved. Today, those companies producing about $5 billion in combined profits in 2022. Wow. Now, this is part of the shift to renewable energy. As a result, a lot of the energy supply much more dependent on the increased use of solar and wind on exactly what the weather forecasts will mean. And that means that trading for short-term electricity prices becomes all the more sensitive, relevant and something that these companies are making big profits on.
Yeah, absolutely. This, of course, as we've seen such extreme weather, in the last year. I mean, we had the wettest December ever in the UK, one of the hottest years in the human history last year. So, yeah, really interesting, this piece about actually how you deal with that in terms of renewable energy supplies across Europe.
Well, let's get more details now on the events in the Middle East this morning. Pakistan says it's attacked targets in Iran, which it described as terrorist hideouts. Iranian state TV says 7 people were killed in an explosion near the border. This as tensions continue in the Red Sea, and the US launched another round of strikes on Houthi targets. Our EMEA News Director Rosalind Matheson joins us now for more. Good morning to you, Ros. What do we know about what's happened on the Iran-Pakistan border?
Well, we know, as you say, that this started when Iran launched some strikes against a separatist group that's based in a border area with Iran. And that's not uncommon to be striking that group. That's something that's been happening for many, many years. This is a group that targets often start inside Iran itself. And we know that Pakistan then retaliated by saying it carried out those targeted strikes against militant hideouts in Iran itself. But it comes against that broader backdrop of tensions in the Middle East, tensions over Iran in general, and a pretty tricky time for Pakistan, economic turmoil and going into a very difficult election. And so that's why these strikes are getting more attention and are seen as a bit unusual in this moment. The question really is, does it escalate anything? And if so, in what way? But as you say, right now what we know is that Iran carried out the initial strikes. Pakistan felt the need to retaliate, and there's been a few other diplomatic bubbles as a result of that. The question really is, where does it go from here?
Yeah, indeed. Meanwhile, another 14 Houthi targets have been hit by US airstrikes in Yemen. Why has the US done this, and what has it said about the strikes? We heard just earlier on the programme a snippet from David Cameron talking about them.
Well, that's right. The US says that they targeted Houthi missiles, saying they were ready to launch against ships in the Red Sea. We don't have a lot more detail than that. Of course, it follows that initial strike between the US and the UK. That was quite a serious missile strike against Houthi targets inside Yemen. But we don't have a lot of detail. It's hard to know how much this may have degraded the Houthi capability on the ground. We know that some Houthi strikes on ships are continuing. There was another one yesterday on a US-owned bulk carrier. And you still have those warnings for merchant ships to avoid the area. The Houthis have also had years and years of aerial bombardment, mostly from Saudi Arabia. So their equipment tends to be very mobile. They're very quick to be able to move it around, and they know how to hide it. And so it does seem as though, of course, obviously some of their assets have been hit in these various strikes. The question is, how seriously has it damaged the Houthi capability? And will it disrupt at some point their ability to keep hitting ships in the Red Sea?
Now, the Houthis are backed by Iran, and Iran is the common thread in these two stories. What have we heard from Iran about these latest incidents?
Well, mostly Iran's been talking about themselves, warning against coming for Tehran directly. We're hearing that message from various officials, including the foreign minister, who said it yesterday, and particularly to Israel and the US. There's this of two separate issues. One is the proxies for Iran, and then there's Iran proper, which would be a much bigger deal. Iran did say that the US role in the Red Sea would set back the push towards a proper truce between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia, although that truce seems to have been off the table for some time anyway. It's interesting, though, at the same time as you're getting sort of warnings from Iran, particularly against Israel, you're getting a bit of engagement because there were meetings with EU officials in Geneva yesterday. The foreign minister has been at Davos, where he even said that Iran would still want to move forward with ways to try and at least restore some of the commitments in the 2015 nuclear deal with the US. That's the one that Donald Trump ripped up when he was president. And so you're getting these kind of messages on the one hand of strong rhetoric don't come from Iran specifically, but also it's clear that some conversations are happening. We know there's dialogue between the US and Iran at the back end on this. So some effort at least to avoid this escalating.
OK, Rosalind, thank you so much for being with us. That is Bloomberg's EMEA News Director Rosalind Matheson.
Well, back here in the UK, the Prime Minister has survived a vote on his signature immigration policy to deport failed asylum seekers to Rwanda. In the end, only 11 Tory MPs voted against Sunak's plan, despite fears of a wider rebellion. Our UK politics podcast reporter James Wilcock joins us now for more. James, good morning. Was this as damaging to the Prime Minister as some had suggested?
Well, Stephen, you could look at the vote last night. The government won by a 44 MP majority. Compare it back to December's vote, where the government won by a 44 MP majority, and go, why are we making all this fuss about a vote the government has the same amount of support on it did in December? But the damage here is twofold. It is that the purpose of this bill is to try and reassure immigration-conscious, immigration-sensitive voters who are often in the Red Wall, who often voted for Brexit, that this government is delivering for them. And we've just had 2 days of some of the most senior MPs, some of the Conservative Party's leading lights in the area, who have backed immigration and sort of immigration sort of sensitive issues, who are fully Red Wall, sort of like Lee Anderson, come out and say this bill is rubbish, doesn't do the job, and the flagship bill designed to please these voters doesn't cut the mustard. If I were Reform, if I were Labour, you could put good money that in every campaign slogan going into the election, it will be this. And the second damage here is party management. We've had a month for Rishi Sunak to try and resolve these issues or get his party on side. Just this Monday, his strategist said it's unite or lose the election, and they haven't united. So for this, the damage is quite serious, despite the vote last night.
So what does it all mean then, as you say, go into a general election year?
For Tory MPs, I think we have to understand why they were doing this. And there are broadly kind of three reasons. Some say immigration needs to come down. This would be a deterrent. Some say that there would be a poll boost, even from just one flight leaving to Rwanda with migrants on it. And some say to not back it puts the focus on years of failed immigration policy and seeking to go this further. It is worth saying that there is an opposing view, and someone in Davos had a pretty unique perspective on it. Take a listen to former Prime Minister David Cameron.
I remember sitting probably in a chair like this in 2013, 14, when I was Prime Minister. We were way behind in the polls. Everyone had written us off. They were saying, start thinking about packing your bags. And we won that 2015 election. And we won it because we had a strong team with a clear plan. And that's what we've got now. We've got a very capable Prime Minister with a very strong team and a clear plan on how you deal with everything from illegal migration to growing the economy to sorting out some of these problems in terms of international security we've been discussing about. I didn't just come back into this government to come to great foreign gatherings like this and talk about foreign affairs, vital though that is. I came back as a full member of the team because I really believe in this team.
But the one difference between then and now is Cameron had a very united party around a coming Brexit vote that he had promised them. Whereas what the vote yesterday suggests to quite a lot of people who watch this stuff says that up to the point of no confidence, up to the point where the party would fall apart, MPs are looking to their own local constituencies, their own local votes, and trying to shore up support ahead of the election. And that points to more disarray as we go further this year for the Conservative Party.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.